The worst mistake my sister ever made was introducing me to her boyfriend's father. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the De Santis penthouse hard enough to make the Manhattan skyline look blurred and unreal, like the city itself was trying not to witness what was happening inside. I stood near the marble kitchen island gripping a champagne flute I hadn't touched in 20 minutes while laughter bounced around the luxury apartment like I wasn't standing there with my heart slowly cracking open. 33 years old and somehow I still hadn't learned that humiliation always arrived dressed like celebration. "Ava, you okay?" Chloe's voice floated toward me, sweet as honey and twice as fake. My younger sister stood across the room in a silver dress that shimmered under the chandelier lights, one manicured hand resting possessively on Mason De Santis's chest like she'd been standing there forever instead of 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That was all it took for my sister to move into the place I'd occupied for 2 years. Mason smiled down at her. Not guilty, not uncomfortable, just relaxed. Happy, like replacing me had been easy. Maybe it had. Around them, Manhattan elites drank $1,000 whiskey and discussed real estate investments while soft jazz played through hidden speakers. Everything smelled expensive. Leather furniture, cigar smoke drifting in from the balcony, designer perfume lingering in the air. I suddenly hated all of it. "I'm fine," I lied quietly. Chloe's eyes flickered with something sharp beneath her practiced concern. Victory. She'd always needed to win, even when there wasn't supposed to be a competition. Especially then. Mason adjusted the cuff of his tailored black suit before finally looking at me directly. His expression carried the same cold politeness people used when returning something damaged to a store. "Ava," he said carefully, "I think it's better if we're all mature about this." Mature. The word almost made me laugh. A man pushing 40 asking a woman he'd spent 2 years with to be mature, while her diamond bracelet sat on another woman's wrist. 3 days ago he'd still been texting me good morning. Now my sister wore that bracelet I bought him for Christmas hanging from her wrist. "Of course," I whispered. "Wouldn't want to ruin the party." Outside, thunder rolled across the city. The storm had gotten worse since I arrived. Water streaked down the massive windows in silver rivers, while lightning flashed somewhere beyond Central Park. I should have left an hour ago. But heartbreak does strange things to pride. Sometimes you stay longer than necessary just to prove you survived it. Then the room changed. I felt it before I understood it. Conversations softened. People subtly straightened. Attention shifted toward the private hallway near the office entrance. Mason's posture immediately stiffened beside Chloe. And when I looked up, I finally saw him. Luca De Santis walked into the room wearing a charcoal suit that looked tailored onto his body, and an expression carved from absolute control. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair gone almost entirely silver at the temples, close cut in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice because the entire room already belonged to him. Power followed him quietly. Danger did too. He paused near the doorway, speaking briefly to one of the men beside him before his gaze lifted across the penthouse and landed directly on me. Everything inside me froze. Not because he looked at me, but because he didn't look away. There are moments when a room full of wealthy strangers suddenly feels very small. Luca De Santis kept looking at me from across the penthouse while conversations continued around us like nothing had changed. But something had. I could feel it under my skin. In the way Mason stopped smiling. In the way Chloe's fingers tightened around his arm. In the way people subtly moved aside whenever Luca crossed the room, as if the air itself belonged to him. I had heard the De Santis name before, of course. Everyone in New York had. Real estate, restaurants, hotels, donations to hospitals and museums with their last name carved into polished stone walls. But there were other rooms in this city where the De Santis name meant something different entirely. Rooms that didn't make the newspapers. Rooms where men lowered their voices and nodded and never asked questions. I had not known about those rooms until tonight. "Dad," Mason said carefully as Luca approached our side of the room. The word caught me off guard. Dad. I had expected someone with softer edges. A man who had spent 2 decades behind a desk growing comfortable and careful. But Luca looked nothing like that. He moved like someone who had built his empire with his hands as much as his mind, and never entirely stopped. He looked controlled, sharp, Dangerous in the quietest possible way. Mason. Luca's voice was deep and calm, carrying the faint trace of an Italian accent beneath polished American edges. His eyes briefly shifted toward Chloe before settling on me again. You did not mention we had a guest. Chloe straightened immediately, flashing a perfect smile. I am Chloe Carter, Mason's girlfriend. The word girlfriend landed like broken glass somewhere inside my chest. Luca nodded once, polite but unreadable. Then his gaze moved back to me. And you are? I swallowed hard. Ava. Something strange flickered across his expression when I said my name. Not recognition. Not attraction exactly. Interest. The kind that made my pulse stumble. Ava Carter, Chloe added quickly before I could continue. My sister. Silence followed. Heavy. Luca looked between the two of us slowly, taking in the identical dark blonde hair. The same blue eyes, the same last name. But unlike Chloe, I still looked like I wanted to disappear. Interesting, he said softly. Mason laughed nervously beside her. Ava and I used to date. Ancient history now. Used to. 2 years reduced to 2 words. My stomach twisted. Luca's attention shifted to his son for the first time since walking over. Did you? The question sounded simple. Somehow it was not. Mason cleared his throat. People move on. Luca studied him for a long second before looking back at me. I suddenly became hyper-aware of everything. The rain against the windows. The ice clinking inside someone's whiskey glass nearby. The warmth of embarrassment crawling up my neck. Excuse me, I whispered. I should probably head home. Chloe looked relieved. Mason looked guilty for exactly half a second. But Luca stepped slightly aside instead of letting me pass immediately. Not blocking me. Just close enough that I caught the scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne. It is pouring outside, he said quietly. You drove here. No. Then wait for the storm to calm down. His voice was not forceful. Somehow that made it harder to refuse. I glanced toward the massive windows where lightning flashed over Manhattan again. The storm looked worse now. Streets below glistened black beneath the city lights. I will be fine, I said softly. Luca's eyes held mine for one dangerous second too long. That, he murmured, does not sound very convincing. The elevator ride down from the penthouse felt longer than it should have. Too quiet. Too heavy. Rain lashed against the glass walls of the building while soft instrumental music drifted through hidden speakers overhead, but all I could really hear was my own heartbeat refusing to settle. Mason and Chloe had disappeared back into the party the second Luca stepped away to answer a phone call near the office hallway. Neither of them tried to stop me from leaving. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself as the elevator doors opened into the marble lobby. Midnight in Manhattan always felt strange during storms. The city looked beautiful from a distance and lonely up close. Outside, thunder cracked so loudly it rattled the glass entrance doors. I pulled out my phone to order a rideshare, but the screen immediately flashed surge pricing so ridiculous it almost made me laugh. $240 for a 15-minute drive back to Queens. Perfect. I stepped beneath the covered entrance anyway, hoping the rain might slow down. It did not. Water poured from the black sky in sheets thick enough to blur traffic lights into streaks of red and gold. Taxi after taxi passed without stopping. Cold wind slipped beneath my coat and raised goosebumps along my arms. You are still here. His voice came from behind me low and calm enough to make me jump anyway. I turned too quickly and found Luca standing several feet away near the revolving doors. No security beside him now. No crowd. Just him in that charcoal suit with rain-darkened shadows touching the edges of his collar. Somehow he looked even more dangerous alone. I was trying to get a ride, I admitted quietly. Luca glanced toward the street where another cab ignored me completely. At this hour? In this storm? One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not mocking, just knowing. I crossed my arms tighter. I will figure it out. His eyes settled on me again with that same unreadable focus that made my stomach feel strangely unsteady. You always say that like you are trying to convince yourself. Before I could answer, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled smoothly to the curb in front of the building. The driver stepped out immediately, umbrella already open despite the rain hammering sideways across the sidewalk. Luca looked toward the car once then back at me. I can have you home in 20 minutes. That is really not necessary. Probably not. He stepped slightly closer, close enough for me to notice the silver threading through his dark hair beneath the lobby lights, and the steadiness in his eyes that came from a man who had stopped needing to prove anything to anyone a long time ago. But I am offering anyway. I hesitated. Every warning instinct inside me whispered that getting into a luxury car with my ex-boyfriend's father at midnight during a thunderstorm was exactly the kind of decision women later regretted in documentaries. But another part of me remembered the way Mason had looked through me upstairs like I no longer mattered. Luca had looked at me the opposite way, like I was the only thing in the room worth noticing, and that felt far more dangerous. "Queens?" he asked quietly. I blinked. "How did you know?" "Your sister mentioned it once." Something about the answer felt incomplete. The driver held the rear door open while rain pounded against the pavement around us. Luca waited without pressuring me. Perfectly patient, perfectly controlled, that somehow made it harder to refuse him. Finally, I stepped toward the car before common sense could stop me. Luca followed a second later, and the moment the door closed behind us, shutting out the storm, I realized I had just entered a world I did not understand at all. The inside of the Rolls-Royce smelled like leather, cedarwood, and rain carried in from expensive coats. Soft amber lights glowed beneath polished black panels while Manhattan blurred past the tinted windows in streaks of silver and gold. I sat carefully on the far side of the back seat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying not to notice how absurd this entire situation felt. 10 hours ago I had still believed Mason and I were fixing our relationship. Now I was riding through a thunderstorm beside his father. Life could ruin your dignity very quickly. Luca sat across from me at an angle, one arm resting loosely against the seat beside him while the city lights carved shadows across the sharp lines of his face. Up close he looked even more intimidating. Not because he appeared cruel, because he appeared controlled, like the kind of man who never lost his temper because he never needed to. The silence stretched comfortably for him, painfully for me. Finally he glanced toward my trembling hands. "You are cold." "I am fine." His eyes lifted slowly to mine. "You keep saying that." I looked away toward the rain sliding down the windows. Queen suddenly felt very far away. "I guess tonight was embarrassing enough already," I admitted quietly. "I do not need pity too." Luca's expression did not change. "Good." I blinked in surprise, turning back toward him. "Good. I dislike pity." His voice remained calm, almost thoughtful. "Most people use it to feel superior." Something about the answer caught me off guard. I studied him more carefully then. The expensive watch resting beneath his cuff. The faint scar near his jawline barely visible beneath the dim lights. Not the kind a man got from a kitchen accident or a car crash, but the kind that came from a life where violence was sometimes the only available language. The exhaustion hidden behind controlled eyes. Powerful men in magazines always looked polished and untouchable. Luca looked human in the strangest possible way. Dangerous still, but human. Outside, the storm intensified, thunder rumbling across the city while headlights reflected off soaked pavement below. The driver moved smoothly through late-night traffic as if Manhattan itself parted for this car. "You loved my son." Luca said it quietly, not as a question. My throat tightened instantly. "I thought I did. And now?" I laughed once softly without humor. "Now I think maybe I loved the version of him he pretended to be." Luca watched me for a long moment after that. "That answer sounds honest." "It is the only thing I have left tonight." Something shifted in his expression then. Respect maybe, or recognition. I could not tell. The car slowed briefly at a red light and neon reflections slid across the glass between us. "Mason has always confused admiration with love," Luca said finally. "They are not the same thing." Hearing him speak critically about his own son felt strangely intimate. "You do not sound surprised by what happened upstairs." "I am not." His honesty stunned me. "Then why did you invite me there?" He held my gaze steadily. "Because Mason specifically asked me not to." Silence dropped heavily between us. "Why would he do that?" Luca's jaw tightened slightly before he answered. "Because weak men become nervous when someone better walks into the room." Heat rushed unexpectedly into my face. I do not think your son would describe me that way. My son, Luca said calmly, has never understood value properly. The words landed harder than they should have. I looked down at my hands again, trying to steady my breathing while rain battered the windows around us. Then quietly, almost against my own better judgment, I asked the question that had been burning inside me since the penthouse. What exactly do you do, Luca? For the first time all night his expression became unreadable. For a second I thought Luca was not going to answer me at all. The Rolls-Royce continued through rain-soaked streets while Manhattan slowly faded behind us, skyscraper lights dissolving into blurred reflections against the windows. Then Luca leaned back slightly in his seat and adjusted the cuff of his charcoal coat with calm, deliberate movements. Real estate, he said smoothly. Shipping. Hospitality. His eyes lifted to mine again. A few other investments. The answer sounded polished enough for a magazine interview. It also sounded incomplete in the way that carefully constructed answers always did. Like a house with one room that was never mentioned and never unlocked. I nodded anyway, pretending I believed him. You own half the city. One corner of his mouth lifted faintly. Only the expensive half. Despite myself, a small laugh escaped me. The first real one all night. Luca noticed immediately. I could tell by the way his expression softened for half a second before returning to controlled neutrality. There it is, he murmured. What? The real smile. Heat crept unexpectedly into my cheeks again. I looked back toward the rain outside, hoping darkness would hide it. You analyze everyone this much? Only people who interest me. The air inside the car suddenly felt warmer. Dangerous. I shifted slightly in my seat, trying to ignore the strange tension curling low in my stomach. This was ridiculous. Luca De Santis was older than me by more than 20 years. He was my ex-boyfriend's father. A man who had built an empire before I had finished college, who carried the weight of decades in the steadiness of his hands and the patience in his eyes. Powerful. Untouchable. Completely out of my world. And yet every time he looked directly at me, I felt like the center of something I did not understand. You should stop doing that, I said quietly before I could stop myself. His brows lifted slightly. Doing what? Looking at me like that. Silence. Heavy and electric. Rain tapped softly against the windows while the city blurred past outside. Luca's gaze remained fixed on me, calm enough to make my pulse stumble harder. And how exactly am I looking at you, Ava? I opened my mouth and closed it again, because I did not have a safe answer for that. Like he noticed me too much. Like he saw through things I tried very hard to hide. Like he was already thinking thoughts neither of us should be having. I looked down at my hands instead. Forget it. Luca studied me for another long second before finally looking away toward the passing traffic. You are very careful, he said quietly. No, I admitted softly. I just learned the hard way what happens when I trust the wrong people. Something dark flickered behind his eyes, then disappeared just as quickly. Mason made a mistake tonight. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That seems to be the opinion of exactly one person. 2. I frowned slightly. Who is the second? Luca looked directly at me again. You. The words settled somewhere deep inside my chest before I could stop them. Outside, the storm finally began to weaken, rain slowing from violent sheets to soft streaks across the glass. The driver turned down a quieter street lined with old brick apartment buildings and dim storefronts closed for the night. Queens. Reality returned all at once. My tiny apartment. My normal life. The enormous distance between me and the man sitting beside me. You can drop me right here, I said quickly as the car slowed near my building. Luca glanced through the window at the neighborhood, silently taking in the cracked sidewalks and flickering corner deli sign across the street. Then his eyes moved back to me. This area is not ideal after midnight. It is home. That does not make it safe. The driver stepped out holding an umbrella as rain misted softly beneath streetlights outside. I reached for the door handle before Luca spoke again, low enough that something inside me instantly stilled. Ava. I looked back at him. Do not let tonight convince you that being underestimated is weakness. His gaze held mine steadily. Sometimes it is the most dangerous thing about a person. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw different versions of the same moment. Mason standing beside Chloe with his arm around her waist. Luca watching me across the penthouse like he already understood something I did not. The quiet intensity in his voice inside the car. You are very careful. By 3 in the morning, rain still tapped softly against my apartment window, while Queens buzzed with distant sirens and late-night traffic below. My studio apartment suddenly felt impossibly small after stepping inside Luca De Santis's world. The cracked ceiling above my bed. The old radiator knocking every few minutes. The faint smell of coffee grounds from the deli downstairs drifting through the window. Normal. Safe. Mine. I kept telling myself that last part mattered most. By 7:30 I gave up on sleep completely and got ready for work. The coffee shop near Midtown opened at 8, and missing shifts was not an option when rent was already due next week. I tied my hair back, covered the dark circles under my eyes with makeup, and forced myself into motion. Survival looked very ordinary most mornings. The city smelled like wet concrete after storms. Steam rose from subway grates while people rushed through Manhattan carrying umbrellas and overpriced coffee cups like the world had not shifted overnight. I almost convinced myself the previous evening had been some strange emotional hallucination caused by heartbreak and expensive champagne. Then I walked into the cafe and saw the flowers. White orchids. At least 2 dozen arranged in a sleek black box sitting directly on the counter beside the register. Every employee inside was staring at them. Ava, my coworker Jenna whispered dramatically the second I stepped through the door. Who did you murder and marry overnight? I froze. A small cream-colored card rested against the flowers written in elegant sharp handwriting. I knew who it was from before I even touched it. Some instincts arrived fully formed. I opened the card carefully beneath the warm cafe lights. For surviving last night with your dignity intact. LD. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually faint. Jenna grabbed my arm, immediately squealing under her breath. LD? Who is LD? Wait, is he rich? Please tell me he is rich. I closed the card too quickly. It is nothing. Nothing does not send orchids that probably cost more than my car payment. She was not wrong. Customers walking past the counter were already staring at the arrangement. I looked around the cafe, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow near the windows. Every man in a dark coat. Every passing black car outside. This was insane. Luca had somehow found out where I worked in less than 12 hours. A normal man would have texted. Luca De Santis sent orchids large. Enough to shut down a coffee shop. Ava. Jenna leaned closer, lowering her voice. Who exactly did you meet last night? Before I could answer, the bell above the cafe door chimed softly. 3 men entered wearing tailored dark coats despite the morning rush. Not threatening. Not loud. But the entire energy inside the cafe shifted instantly anyway. The tallest one approached the counter calmly, while the other 2 remained near the entrance, scanning the room with quiet precision. My pulse stumbled. The man offered a polite nod. Miss Carter. His voice carried the same polished control I now associated with the De Santis name. Mr. De Santis asked us to escort you safely to work this morning. I stared at him, completely speechless. I am already at work. Yes. The man glanced briefly toward the orchids. And Mr. De Santis would like to ensure you remain safe while you are here. Cold realization slid slowly down my spine. This was not flirting anymore. This was protection. And somehow that felt much more dangerous. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of espresso machines hissing, customers rushing through morning orders, and 3 silent men in dark coats standing near the windows like expensive statues. They never interfered, never spoke unless I looked directly at them. But every person in the cafe noticed them, especially me. By noon, Jenna had invented at least 6 theories about my mysterious billionaire admirer, including one involving international royalty and secret witness protection. I laughed when appropriate and pretended my heart was not beating too fast every time the front door opened. Around 1:30 my phone buzzed in the pocket of my apron. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering quietly near the back hallway. Hello. You look exhausted. Luca's voice slid through the phone, low and calm enough to send immediate warmth into my chest despite every warning instinct I still possessed. I glanced sharply toward the cafe windows. One of the men outside adjusted his coat slightly but otherwise remained expressionless. Are you watching me right now? A pause. Indirectly. I pressed my fingers against my temple. This is insane. Possibly. There was the faint sound of papers moving on his end, followed by muffled voices somewhere in the background. He sounded busy. Important. Completely unbothered by the fact that he had apparently stationed security outside my workplace like this was normal behavior. Luca, I whispered carefully. Why exactly do I need protection? Silence stretched just long enough to make my stomach tighten. Because people notice things, he said finally. And I dislike unnecessary risks. What people? The kind who pay attention when I pay attention. The answer sent a chill slowly down my spine. I leaned against the hallway wall, staring at the faded employee schedules taped beside the mop closet. Suddenly my tiny coffee shop job felt connected to something far larger than I understood. You make it sound dangerous to know you. Another pause. Longer this time. Sometimes it is. His honesty unsettled me more than lies would have. Then maybe you should stop sending flowers to my workplace. I expected irritation. Maybe amusement. Instead, Luca's voice softened slightly. You did not like them? My chest tightened unexpectedly. That was the problem. I had liked them too much. That is not the point. It usually is. Before I could answer, the cafe door opened hard enough to rattle the glass. I looked up instinctively toward the front counter and froze. Mason. Even from halfway across the cafe, I recognized the tension in his shoulders immediately. His expensive coat still carried rainwater along the sleeves, and his jaw looked tight enough to crack. The moment the men near the windows straightened subtly, I understood something important very quickly. They already knew who he was. Ava. Mason's voice carried across the cafe sharp enough to turn heads. Jenna looked between us wide-eyed while customers awkwardly pretended not to listen. I have been calling you all morning. My stomach twisted. I had ignored 12 missed calls already. I am working. Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice only slightly. We need to talk. Now. Before I could answer, one of Luca's men moved calmly between us. Polite. Professional. Completely immovable. Miss Carter is busy. Mason stared at him. In disbelief. Who the hell are you? The man did not blink. Security. Mason's eyes snapped toward me, instantly realization dawning slowly across his face. Then came something worse. Fear. Real fear. Ava, he said carefully this time. Tell me you are not involved with my father. The line went silent against my ear. Luca was still listening. My breath caught so sharply it almost hurt. The entire cafe suddenly felt too small. Too warm. Mason stood near the counter staring at me like he no longer recognized the situation unfolding around him, while Luca remained silent on the phone pressed against my ear. Listening. Waiting. Answer me, Ava. Mason's voice dropped lower, now edged with something dangerously close to panic. Why does my father have security at your job? Customers nearby pretended to study menus while openly watching us. Jenna stood frozen beside the espresso machine, clutching a milk pitcher, like she had accidentally wandered into a Netflix crime drama. I stepped out from behind the counter, trying to steady my heartbeat. Mason, this is not the place. No, he snapped quietly. The place was last night before you got into his car. Silence crashed through me. He knew. Of course he knew. Men like Luca De Santis probably never moved anywhere unnoticed. One of the security men shifted subtly beside us, and Mason immediately lowered his voice further. Do you understand who my father is? I tightened my grip on the phone. No, I admitted honestly. Not really. Mason laughed once without humor, dragging a hand through his rain-damp hair. Exactly. Something cold slid into my stomach, hearing fear in his voice again. Real fear. Not jealousy. Not anger. Fear. Mason, I whispered carefully. What are you talking about? His eyes darted briefly toward the men near the windows before landing back on me. You think those guys are bodyguards because he likes you? The silence on Luca's end of the phone became heavier somehow. Mason, Luca said calmly through the speaker for the first time. Just one word. Mason froze instantly. The entire color drained from his face so fast it startled me. Dad, you are causing a scene. Luca's voice remained perfectly controlled. That somehow made it worse. She deserves to know what this really is. What exactly is this? I asked quietly, pulse hammering now. Neither of them answered immediately. Outside, rain misted softly against the cafe windows while traffic crawled through Manhattan streets beyond the glass. Normal people walked past carrying coffee cups and umbrellas, completely unaware that my entire reality had shifted in less than 24 hours. Finally, Mason looked directly at me. My father does not protect people unless they matter to him. Luca remained silent. And if they matter to him, Mason continued carefully, people notice. My chest tightened. The exact same words Luca had used earlier. You are acting like he is dangerous. Mason stared at me for a long second before answering softly. Ava, my father is not just a businessman. He exhaled slowly like a man finally putting down something he had been carrying for years. The De Santis family has run organized crime in this city for 3 generations. My grandfather brought it from Sicily. My father built it into something no one touches. No one. The cafe suddenly felt colder. I thought about the penthouse, the security, the way entire rooms shifted when Luca entered them, the controlled silence surrounding him like everyone instinctively understood rules I did not, the scar near his jaw, the answer never quite finishing. Mason. Luca's voice sharpened through the phone. A warning this time. Mason exhaled slowly, looking almost exhausted. Just stay away from him. I should have agreed immediately. Any sane woman would have. But before I could speak, Luca said quietly into my ear, "Tell me something, Ava." My pulse stumbled again. What? Did my son look worried about you upstairs? Silence. No, I admitted softly. And does he look worried now? I looked at Mason standing tense beneath the cafe lights, eyes fixed entirely on me. My stomach twisted with sudden understanding. Yes. Luca's voice lowered almost to a murmur. Good. Then perhaps he is finally learning the difference between losing something and taking it for granted. Everything after that felt strangely unreal. Mason left the cafe. 20 minutes later, looking pale and furious, while Luca's men silently returned to their positions near the windows like nothing had happened. Customers slowly resumed conversations. Espresso machines hissed again. The world moved forward. But I could still feel Luca's voice lingering against my ear long after the call ended. And Mason's words. 3 generations. Sicily. Organized crime. I had known something was wrong. I had felt it in every room Luca entered, in every silence that followed his name, in the way men twice his size stepped aside without being asked. I just hadn't let myself say it out loud. By 6 that evening, Manhattan glowed gold beneath the fading storm clouds. My shift had finally ended and exhaustion pressed heavily against my shoulders as I stepped outside, wrapping my coat tighter against the cold wind. One of Luca's security men immediately straightened from beside a black SUV parked near the curb. "Miss Carter." I stopped walking. "Please do not tell me there is another car waiting for me." The man almost smiled. "Almost. Mr. De Santis requested that we drive you home." Requested. Strongly. I let out a tired breath, staring at the wet pavement beneath my boots. 12 hours ago I had been invisible. Now I apparently traveled with an escort team that belonged to an Italian crime family with 3 generations of history in this city. "I can take the subway." "You could," the man agreed politely. "But Mr. De Santis would dislike it." The ridiculous part was that I already knew he was right. My phone buzzed before I could answer. Unknown number again. I stared at it for 2 seconds before accepting the call. "Your expression tells me you are about to argue with my security team." Luca's voice sounded smoother tonight, softer somehow beneath the low background noise of traffic and distant conversation. I looked toward the city skyline glowing between buildings. "You really do enjoy controlling everything." "Not everything. Most things. Only the things I care about." The answer landed too directly. My pulse betrayed me immediately. I turned slightly away from the security men, lowering my voice. "Luca." "Yes." "Why me?" Silence answered. "First. Heavy enough to matter." "Because," he said finally, "you walked into a room full of people trying to impress each other and somehow remained completely yourself." My chest tightened unexpectedly. "You barely know me." "That is true." His voice lowered slightly. "Which makes it more concerning that I already think about you this much." Heat rushed through me so quickly I hated myself for it. Dangerous men were not supposed to sound honest. "This is a bad idea," I whispered. "Probably. Your son hates me now." "No." Luca sounded calm. "Certain. My son hates himself. You are simply nearby while he realizes it." A black town car rolled slowly past the cafe, then disappeared into traffic beyond the intersection. Somewhere farther downtown, sirens echoed softly through the city night. New York suddenly felt enormous and intimate at the same time. "You still have not told me what you really do," I said quietly. "My son told you," Luca said after a pause. "Not denying it. Not explaining. Just letting it sit there between us like a stone dropped into still water." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the sidewalk as another vehicle turned onto the street too quickly. Tires hissed against wet pavement. One of the security men immediately stepped closer beside me, his attention sharpening toward the intersection. The energy around us changed instantly. Controlled. Alert. My stomach tightened. "Luca," I whispered carefully. "What is happening?" His voice became very calm on the other end of the line. Too calm. "Get into the SUV now, Ava." Fear slid coldly through my chest for the first time since meeting him. Not because of the car approaching. Not because of the wet street or the vehicle moving too fast or the men around me suddenly tensing with quiet, controlled urgency. Because I suddenly realized Luca had expected this. He had been waiting for it. And men like Luca De Santis, men who had run this city's shadows for 30 years, did not wait for things they could not handle.